The latest UK house prices seasonally adjusted data published by the Halifax registered a fall of 0.1% for May 2015 that followed a 1.6% surge for April as George Osborne succeeded in his pre-election house prices boom. The non-seasonally adjusted UK house prices momentum graph more clearly illustrates the point that the UK house prices boom was engineered to peak just prior to election day at plus 10.3%, which barely a month later has already taken a dive to plus 7%. Whilst I expect house prices momentum will continue to fall for a couple more months, however, don't take this post-election slowdown, as many are doing, as a harbinger of anything other than just a mild correction, as I expect the overriding bull market trend to reassert itself as the fundamental drivers continue to strengthen, i.e. drivers such as out-of-control immigration, with the most recent net migration figures soaring by 50% to 318,000 per year, which makes a mockery of every promise and pledge that the Conservative-led coalition made for the past 5 years of not just controlling immigration, which is in addition to the 250,000 natural growth that remains one of the key primary megatrend drivers for house prices. This graph further illustrates the effect of out-of-control immigration on UK house prices as the ratio between the cumulative change in population since 1970 set against the cumulative number of new housing built since 1970 as an overcrowding ratio that illustrates the worsening trend in the level of overcrowding due to the inability of new supply to meet new demand that just keeps accumulating each year, which acts to propel house prices ever higher regardless of the stream of academic theories as to why house prices cannot rise, because they have become increasingly unaffordable to most, far outpacing average wages. Other key drivers are of course record low interest rates. Yes, even ordinary retail mortgage customers are temporarily reaping the rewards of an artificial banking system that is screwing savers and workers by inflating the money supply through printed money, as illustrated by the surge in mortgage approvals, as there appears to be a mad dash to fix before the market rates rise, as the banking system encourages all to saddle up with debt financed by money conjured out of thin air, i.e. fractional reserve banking, so that everyone and everything is turned into a debt slave, wholly focused on meeting those monthly interest payments rather than to rage against the machine. It is now 15 months since I published my 5-year UK house prices trend forecast for an average rise of 55% by the end of 2018. In terms of the current state of the UK housing bull market, the Halifax average house prices index for May 2015 of £198,684 is currently showing a 3% deviation against the forecast trend trajectory, which if it continues to persist, then in terms of the long-term trend forecast for a 55% rise, then by the end of 2018 would translate into a 10% reduction to the forecast outcome to approximately a 45% rise. The next big milestone will be when average house prices set a new record high, which despite the post-election slowdown should be imminent, and we will probably see such headlines on release of July data, which also illustrates the point that George Osborne just missed achieving such headlines just prior to election day. And looking beyond my existing 5-year forecast, covering the period into the end of 2018, that after 7 years of relative economic pain from 2008 to 2014, as illustrated by the cost of living crisis, Britain this year has entered into a 7-year economic boom of above trend growth that can only continue to drive UK house prices bull market well into the 2020s, for which I will expect at least an average increase of 10% per annum. That's a minimum 70% further rise in average UK house prices. Details on this to come over many years, so ensure you're subscribed to this YouTube channel. Whilst the opinion pollsters, academics, pseudo-analysts called journalists, and the bookmakers all got the 2015 UK general election result badly wrong, right up to the close of the polls, who collectively forecast that the only workable outcome will be one of a minority Labour government supported by the SNP. However, for what actually did prove virtually spot on in forecasting the outcome of the UK general election, I turn to my analysis of UK house prices that since December 2013 consistently forecast a Conservative outright election victory, as illustrated by the following video excerpts.
2014. Recent opinion polls put Labour 6 points ahead of the Conservatives, which would translate in a Labour election victory. Similarly, the bookies also all favour Labour as the party to win the most seats at the next general election. However, what the opinion pollsters, bookies and mainstream media commentators fail to grasp is the likely impact of an accelerating UK housing market momentum on a general election that is near 18 months away. As this graph illustrates the impact of UK house price trends on general election results over the past 30 years. The key point is that the trend and strength of housing market momentum during the 2 years in the run-up to each general election is a good indicator for the probable outcome in terms of whether the government or opposition party will win, and the likely size of the majority. Taking a more conservative house price inflation rate of 8.5% would imply that the window for an outright Labour election victory has already ended as of July 2013. An election held today would result in a coalition government with a majority of about 35 seats, and that the window of opportunity for a coalition government ends by mid-2014, after which there is an increasing probability for a Conservative outright majority. Therefore, in conclusion, a May 2015 general election would result in a Conservative overall majority of about 30 seats. Do read the full analysis for the political strategies that the various parties may employ in the run-up to the next general election as they try to skew the results in their favour.
Remains on track to achieve a 55% increase by the end of 2018. The updated election forecast graph shows that, contrary to the most recent opinion polls that put the Labour Party ahead of the Tories, such as the Observer's putting Labour on 35% and Conservatives on 31%, instead the Tories have already started to enter into an outright election victory territory, some 3 months ahead of the expected trend, never mind the prospects for another coalition government, which now appear to be extremely improbable. Remember to subscribe to this YouTube channel and my free Market Oracle newsletter. It is now 14 months since I published my UK house prices 5-year trend forecast that concluded in expectations for a 55% rise by the end of 2018. The updated Halifax average house prices graph to January 2015 of £190,000 shows that the UK housing bull market paused from August to December 2014 before resuming its bull trend in January. House prices are currently showing a deviation of 3.3% against the forecast trend trajectory. If the current deviation continued to persist, then this would result in a 15% reduction in the forecast outcome to approx 40% rise by the end of 2018. This graph further illustrates the fall in momentum during the second half of 2014 and the recent surge back higher to 10% as UK house prices look set to soar to an annual inflation rate of well above 10% per annum, timed to just reach their peak during May 2015 at probably around 12%, though unlikely to accelerate any higher due to weakness in house prices in the southeast. Clearly, the house prices driven economic mini boom is timed to peak during May 2015 at approximately 12% per annum. That would just exceed the 10% of Labour's mini boom into May 2010 election, which therefore implies the Conservatives should continue to improve right into polling day. So house prices are suggesting a very similar election result for the Conservatives to that of 2010. My long-standing general election forecast based on house prices is for a probable Conservative general election victory. The updated graph illustrates that the Conservatives are virtually on track to achieve the original forecast outcome for an outright election victory, which no one today is advocating. The latest Halifax average house prices data released for March 2015 of 191.5k is showing a continuation of the bull market after the pause of August to December 2014. House prices are currently showing a deviation of 4% against the forecast trend trajectory. In terms of the long-term trend forecast for a 55% rise in average UK house prices by the end of 2018, if the current deviation continued to persist, then this would result in a 15% reduction in the forecast outcome to approximately a 40% rise by the end of 2018. House price momentum has picked up from February's plus 6.6% to 7.7% for March, though has missed the headline-grabbing new all-time high in average UK house prices just prior to election day, probably due to ongoing weakness in house prices in the southeast. Therefore, the Conservatives' mini-election boom appears to have failed to spike to a plus 10% inflation rate for election day, where my expectations were that it could have ranged to as high as plus 12%. That would have triggered an outright majority 30 seats inducing result, as my long-standing analysis of seats versus house prices forecast. The updated election seats trend graph suggests that the Conservatives are on target towards achieving a single digits outright majority, which is completely contrary to every opinion poll published this year, which if it materializes, then I'm sure for election 2020 everyone will be staring at the house prices indices rather than the opinion polls, though as is usually the case that when the consensus becomes focused on a particular indicator, then that is when it usually stops working. Therefore, my analysis of UK house prices converted into seats by far proved to be the most accurate forecaster for the UK general election outcome. And since I have a good idea of how house prices will perform over the next 5 years, then I can tell you with some confidence that the Conservatives are also likely to win the 2020 general election. Though in the interest of accuracy, do come back to my detailed analysis to conclude in seats per party forecast that I will probably publish a good year before the next general election. So do subscribe to this YouTube channel for this and other ongoing market analysis forecasts.